so I'm feeling a little inspired. See, IGN made these videos where developers react to speedruns of their game, and I saw the one where Half-Life developers react to the speedrun of Half-Life 2. And they mentioned through the speedrun that there was a goofy thing they did in development called Baby Crate. For some reason, they decided to put the baby doll in a crate, pick up the crate. Keep in mind you can just pick up the baby doll, by the way, and then carry that to the end of the game, or as far as possible. Now, in Half-Life 2, there wasn't any purpose to this. This is just something they goofed off in development. But in Half-Life 2 Episode 2, they made it an achievement, except they used a gnome. You have to carry this garden gnome to the end of the game, put it in a rocket, and you're good. And you get the achievement, and yay! So I felt inspired. I was like, now that I know the backstory to this achievement, I gotta do it. And hey, I got the achievement. But it was one of the most frustrating things I've done in my gamer career. And let me explain why. Alright, so at the start it's pretty easy. You just carry this gnome around. Simple, not that difficult. You press E on it and you drop it whenever you run into enemies. And to the Source Engine's credit, it's pretty good at remembering where things were. So if you leave something in a certain area and you go run off and do some nonsense, it'll usually still be in the same spot. Now the Source Engine is also kind of dumb, in that there's a lot of ways to abuse it. For example, you have the magical space pickaxe that will teleport you to new dimensions if you dare to take it to the next level. And the fact that backward acceleration is not capped, so you can just keep going backwards as fast as you want. To be fair, this achievement's pretty easy until you skip half the game and go to the car section. That's because the car is when everything breaks and becomes really stupid. See, there's nowhere to put the gnome on the car. You drive around with Alex, of Half-Life Alex, but she doesn't hold the gnome. There's nowhere to put the gnome in the car, and okay, Source is a physics-based game, so the gnome just kind of rattles around in there, and so your best bet is to wedge the gnome into this area behind you, and it doesn't work sometimes, but sometimes it does, in which the gnome will get stuck back there. Now, that's fine until you make a turn, and then which it'll probably pop out, but if you keep it in straight lines and look behind you while turning, you can kind of get pretty far doing this strategy. Now I hear some of you saying, you don't really need the car. I've seen speedrunners not use it, and that's true, but unfortunately, all the methods that require launching yourself backwards usually require a free hand, and you can't do that because you got the gnome. And the ones that don't require a free hand, I'm too garbage to actually do. You can't even use the space pickaxe because you move so fast you drop whatever you're holding. So you gotta take the car, but it gets worse because there's a bunch of loading screens. The gnome location anywhere in the car will start to flip out in the loading screen, or usually the gnome will just fall out of the car, and you have to go find it, and you might trigger the loading screen again trying to find the gnome. Other times the gnome will just despawn, because that's fun. So you basically drive up to a loading screen, you quick save, you drive through it, you hope for the best won't happen, quick load, jump out of the car, pull the gnome out, throw it past the loading screen, get back into the car, drive forward. Sometimes that's not good enough either, and you just grab the gnome, jump across the loading screen, hopefully the car moves forward, sometimes it does. So yeah, that's a fun mechanic. And there's also a lot of enemies shooting at you that are kind of designed to be skipped, but given that the gnome is right behind your head in the car, they will normally shoot the gnome, which causes it to fall out of the car. There's this whole section where you have to dodge a helicopter that seemingly has gnome-seeking bullets, I swear. Every time the thing burst fired, it would shoot the gnome out, then you'd get out of the car to go grab the gnome, and then it would burst fire you directly, which would take away like half your health. I did actually manage to find a way to despawn the helicopter by going through the loading screen to the next area and then going back into the original area. But I didn't figure that out until after I carried the gnome through the fucking gauntlet. There's also barnacles, which are pretty unassuming little creatures in the Half-Life universe and kind of a staple, but those also have a thirst for gnome blood. Now after that helicopter fight, you will get led into a garage where they'll say, hey, we'll repair your car if you deal with these Combine for us, and you see this nice little table there. That table is prime gnome real estate while we come back to this garage later to get the car. And you would be correct, you do come back to the garage, but the fun thing is, they decided to despawn that table to put your car on it, and everything on that table goes away. So now you gotta reload back before you put the gnome on the table to go throw it up onto the top section. That's not good gnome real estate. This is just bad gnome design as far as I'm concerned. Now luckily there's only a few times where you actually have to worry about your gnome being teleported to the gnome dimension. But it doesn't help the paranoia. See, you don't know where that gnome is going to be. You don't know where a cutscene is going to be. You don't know what's safe. Is this table safe? Is this corner safe? Is that enemy with a grenade over there safe? Who knows? You never know. You develop a paranoia. You start getting worried. Does this harlot want the gnome? You never know. Eventually, you make it to the base you were trying to get to the entire game, Black Forest, and you get to leave your car behind because it's just going to teleport somewhere else. So that's cool. Take your gnome with you, don't risk it. Now you get to explore the base and view all the pissed off NPCs because they view their savior of mankind as a madman who's carried around a gnome for the past few hours. And eventually, you're going to stumble upon the rocket that you need for this achievement, and you see a hatch open. And you see a head crab jump in there, and you know that's where the gnome goes. So you place him in there, and you give him a few goodbye whacks with your crowbar. But of course, you don't get the achievement yet. It hasn't gone to space yet. And that's what the achievement says you have to do. So of course, it's completely natural that you wouldn't get the achievement right now. Duh. And then you get on to the next section of the game. And the next section of the game involves fighting the Strider enemy with these new fancy-pantsy mines that attach to your car, and you quickly realize, hey, wait a second, this new car bracket thing is kinda handy. I can put a mine on the car now, and it's nice and secure. So, riddle me this, Batman. It's just a bracket. Why didn't this exist from the start of the game? Why couldn't I put the gnome on the bracket at the start of the game and have all the little advantages of the little mine thing? Why couldn't I just put the bracket, the gnome there? That would have solved all of the problems. Yeah, easy peasy. It could have just been done. It's not done though. So you get pissed off at this for a little while, then you go do the final part of the game, which is actually pretty fun. I really like the end of the game, and it's probably one of the reasons why it's my favorite of the Half-Life 2s. Anyway, so you do that. Game ends, you get to watch the rocket go up into space, and you get to wait for your achievement, and you get to see all the good, you get to see what all your hard work paid off on, and you watch the rocket go into space, and you don't get the achievement, because that's not what you had to do, idiot. When you put the gnome into the rocket ship, you didn't have to wait for the rocket ship to go to space, you just had to press E on the little door. Yeah, I bet you didn't think about doing that either, because I didn't the first time. Because apparently all the scientists that work here are hacks. They didn't even go through a checklist. They're just like, Gordon closed the door, so all the wiring in there ought to be A-okay, despite the fact that we were just working on that. It's probably fine. Gordon closed it. And if you don't close the door, they're just like, the savior of mankind put a gnome in this rocket, but I clearly must be mistaken, despite the fact that he's basically a demigod that is capable of killing millions of enemies that we can't really explain. He also teleported into the future like 7 years, and whatever, it's fine, who cares? So really, you don't even have to do the achievement. You just have to close the door. The gnome doesn't have to go to space, so they basically just lied. So yeah, I'm gonna want a full refund of this game that I bought 12 years ago.